You could show the data that kids have less creativity today than before, but once you know why, you start to see, hey, maybe the tool itself, the fact that this tool does nothing but store memories and information and get it out of your brain, maybe that's why it's not good for us. Maybe it's good for production, but it never should have been in a classroom for learning.
Welcome back to The Narrative. Aaron Baer, David Mahan, going old school today with Mike Andrews out celebrating his anniversary. I don't know, David, you guys are you're heading up to what, 50th anniversary or something like that?
Man. 31 is strong.
Yeah, something like that. No,
strong.
Mike is out this week.
Babe.
Right? Mike's out this week, but David and I are going back to the good old days of The Narrative, catching up. And David just got back from the swamp itself, coming back from D.C., meeting with friends from all over the country, fighting the gender ideology battle. I mean, I want to hear, David, you literally got back like an hour ago off the plane, but it feels like such a new day on this topic. What was it like out there? What was the discussion like?
Well, there's definitely that vibe shift that everybody keeps talking about, and it's always good to see folks that are on the front lines from really all over the world. Was in the room for a couple of days. So this one particularly, because you had some of the frontline soldiers there, it wasn't all like that hyper awesome vibe shifts. It was like, what are some of the issues that we have to worry about coming down the pike? So, we're talking about the Stryker family, the work that they're doing in Colorado and Kalamazoo, Michigan, billionaires funding the trans movement all over the world. And so entire sectors of strategy coming out of this one particular family. And the one thing that struck me, this was probably yesterday, was the transcontinental pipeline.
Transcontinental.
Yes, they've got an entire website.
Oh my God.
TC pipeline something or other.org. But what they're doing is they're drawing in. If you are not being accepted at home, if your parents aren't affirming you, then they are paying for folks to come to Colorado.
Oh my gosh.
They're finding housing and things like that, and again, it's to tunes of billions of dollars going into this kind of work in Colorado, but also all across the country.
It's such a weird. That's the hardest thing about this fight today, because you have this sort of unholy alliance between ideology and capitalism,
right.
Really, right? Because
Right.
you have these hospitals and medical doctors that see massive amounts of money that could be made, right? We'll talk about this a little bit more when we start talking about some of the stuff going on with the Somali daycares and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of money to be made there, but it's all backed by a true belief that this is a good thing for kids, it's a good thing for the country, it's something we need to do. And it makes it such a difficult ideology. Yeah, I think most of us have seen we're on offense right now. I think in a lot of ways we're winning. But I think it would be wrong to think that we've won or that this has gone away.
Yeah. And then there's some, even on that front, there's some issues with, those that are on the same team, right? Because you have some of the LGB folks who are sick of the T folks.
Yep.
And they came in really clutch, over the last few years, testifying and being whistleblowers. And but now, we're getting a little deeper into the movement, and now you're seeing this break. You got one side of the contingency talking about family and marriage and the intact nuclear family, and then you've got this other side over here that's want to talk LGB rights and things like that. And so now it's where everybody was kind of in the same boat, in the early stages of this whole gender ideology fight. Now you're starting to see factions that kind of break off and so they're fracturing. But it was interesting. Everybody who was anybody was in the room. Chloe Cole was there. Always good to see her. Yeah. Rep Click from Ohio was there. And talking about the great work that we've done here in the state, really leading the nation in this area. But, and that's, to end on a good note, you've got all the HHS report that just came out. We've talked about that here on the podcast. And a lot of great stuff that the administration is doing. And just FYI, there's some really amazing stuff coming. So you'll hear about that from us here on The Narrative.
Yeah, no, there's, again, like we're you never know with any administration whether there's going to be anything to come afterwards. But so you kind of got to get while the getting's good. And that's what we talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago. That's what I appreciated about the HHS report that came out that really was laying that foundation that no matter what happens in the future, we now have the definitive record saying this medicine was garbage, saying what we knew, and here's the receipts from the medical community to back that up.
Yeah, family courts, and that was a big one, coming up. And just to your point, right now, a lot of the red states are seeing great victories in this area. But one of the areas that we really have to pick up on is, this trans ideology in social work, this trans ideology in medicine, and trans ideology in the the family courts.
Yep.
Law.
Oh yeah.
And again, that's a big play from the billionaires who we would oppose are focusing their dollars there.
Yeah, and they're very targeted about knowing what are the areas. Again, you get the family courts, you can do so much there. Moving on, I think one of the big things, and honestly, we're going to be looking at this as a potential guest or a larger topic, but I feel like we have to address what's going on with the Somali daycares first in Minnesota,
right,
and then here now in Columbus. For those of you who have not been tracking with this, I don't know how you haven't, because it's been everywhere, but it's been a slow bubble in Minnesota where they exposed upwards of $9 billion in fraud from primarily Somali-run either daycare centers or housing shelters or things like that. And actually what the City Journal uncovered, Christopher Rufo, who, whenever there's real research happening, somewhere around the corner is Christopher Rufo, thumbing through some files and putting it out there. But they actually tracked, hey, not only was this money, stolen from the taxpayers, it was sent to terrorist groups in Somalia. I in the City Journal piece, it says the largest funder of Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group, is the Minnesota taxpayer.
Insane.
Yeah. And that's he talks about one housing program. And this is, David, again, this is where I actually think more than anything, this is a story of the true harm of DEI, right? Because what you see happening in Minnesota was, one, you had leftists in the first place just thinking government programs are the answers to everything, right? So one of the programs that was defrauded was the Minnesota Medicaid Housing Stability Services Program. And the HHS, it was the first of its kind in the country, and it was designed, as Christopher Rufo wrote in his story, with a noble goal to help seniors, addicts, the disabled, and the mentally ill secure housing. And it was designed with low barriers to entry and minimal requirements for reimbursement.
So why don't you like the mentally ill, Aaron?
Right, exactly. Right, that's really what the problem is.
Terrible.
And it started as a $2.6 million program, and by the time it got shut down, it was over a $104 million program. And it got shut down because there was basically nobody getting housed.
Right.
It was all fraud. However, this program and all these other programs were allowed to have this fraud go on for so long because in most of these cases, in many of these cases, the Somalis running these programs, whenever the state would look at it, they'd say, you're discriminating against us because we're Muslim or BIPOC or whatever. Mm-hmm. And because they were afraid nobody wants to be called racist other than David. No, you want to call people racist. Sorry. You want to call me racist.
That's right. Yeah. I'm waiting for it, family. We're gonna catch you. We're gonna catch him here in a minute.
But because nobody wants to be called racist, literal billions of dollars went out the door.
And good people are going to be hurt by it, right? Because and this is the catch thing. When we're talking about racism, the Trump administration is tough for me because he's the primary messenger, and I know that gets his big impacts because he's brash, he's New York, he's a businessman. But when you're saying an entire people group, an entire country is garbage, I mean, we're talking about humans, right? And you're looping all them in. The same way, these people who are at the top of the food chain, the power brokers within the Somali community there in Minnesota and potentially across the nation, who are taking advantage of the tax system, of the taxpayers' money, these folks that are getting a lot of these benefits and things like that they thought they were obligated to. I mean, they were, they had coming to they're going to lose that, and they may even, some of them, have to go home.
Which, honestly, David, I don't think that's a bad thing. I like, and hear me out. Let's have this discussion here, because there's so many parts of this program, of this process, that are messed up.
Yeah.
I think we saw this. I remember Maria did a story on the Haitian migrants in Springfield for World Magazine when that when all that blew up.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about bringing over people from a third world country, and as soon as they arrive here, we get them signed up for Medicaid, we get them signed up for housing subsidies, we get them signed, and what they learn is being an American means to live off government services. And by the way, they've never in their lives really understood, really had to pay taxes like we do here.
I get it.
Right? And understood, hey, no, actually this money has to come from somewhere, and it's incumbent upon all of us to carry our piece of it. And so, especially if you're over here on temporary status, or you're over here on that's the whole thing with the Haitian migrant thing that frustrated me, even with our governor, is these folks were brought over here on really 3-month programs, and it's literally called a temporary status.
Right.
And they've been here for 9 years, and we're told we're racist for saying, hey, we struck a deal where you could come over for 3 months. We let you stay for 9 years. That's a good deal. You need to go home now.
Right.
That's not racist.
No, I didn't say it was racist.
No, that's not to you. That's to them.
I'm gonna call you racist in a minute, but
Good.
that wouldn't.
Get there. Yeah, I know.
My point is, I work with so many of these kids, youth development work, and actually we've got many in our CAN network that in Springfield. Remember, they're eating the dogs or eating the cats. Those kids had to go to school the next day,
right?
And had to ask, do you guys really eat dogs and cats?
Yeah.
So the human factor of this, those kids didn't have there's no fault in there. And so they're experiencing all the benefits of this stuff that was promised that, to your point, should never have been promised. Right. But now we have these humans, these people who happen to be Somalians in this case, are having to face some really serious realities. And my heart breaks for them, and our prayers should go out. But to your other point, though, where I agree with you as well, is that these programs are starting out $2.6 million, right? Then you've got the Feeding Our Future program starting out $3.4 million. That's a drop in a bucket for Minnesota. That's a drop in a bucket for anybody, right?
Yeah.
Rhode Island, it's a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
Right. So, but then, like, within 12 months, 24 months, we're talking $74 million. We're talking about, 100, 200 million. Right now, I don't know if those of you who are listening understand this, but when the state legislature passes a bill, they do a fiscal analysis, and in these cases, it started 2.6, 3.4.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it just blows up to 100 million, 74 million, 200 million within just a few years. They would be fools in not representing the best interest of their state or the General Assembly or legislature if they didn't ask the question, what happened? How in the world did the autism numbers go through the roof?
I was looking at this. The autism, this is from the Rufo story. Autism claims to Medicaid in Minnesota have skyrocketed in recent years, from 3 million in 2018 to 54 million in 19, 77 in 20, 183 in 21, ultimately 399 in 2023.
What is autism, a social contagion now?
Apparently.
Like, meanwhile, social media.
Meanwhile, the number of autism providers in the state spiked from 41 to 328 over the same period. Many in the Somali community establishing their own autism treatment centers, citing the need for culturally appropriate programming.
Right. And these people clearly were not even diagnosed with autism that they are recruiting for these benefits.
So David, this is where I think having real and honest talk matters. And it's the reason why, and I think J.D. Vance has been really good on this, but having well-regulated and limited immigration and refugee programs, especially from the third world, matters.
100%.
I genuinely believe, like, I've known Mike DeWine for years. I think his heart is he wants to help people, right? But when you bring this many people over from the third world, and you just drop them into the community.
Yep.
Because you want to, like, I know people that are doing ministry to those folks. You want to help them. They're bringing their culture over with them, and they're bringing their approach, and they're bringing things like we can't act like it's just one massive coincidence that the majority of the folks in Minnesota that are abusing these programs are Somali. That is it's not something that because you're Somali you want to exploit the government. You're coming from a third world country where the rule is if you can get it, you get it because no one's looking out for you. And then we bring them over here and we bring massive amounts of people over and allow them to access these programs. And we're surprised that, hey, this is it's culturally acceptable to go along with these things. Yeah. And that seems so ridiculously obvious in this. And if you say it, you get accused of all of these types of things, which is like, no, guys, we're all playing by rules that they don't agree to.
Especially in Minnesota, where they have majorities in certain areas. What Democrat is going to question that stupid increase in autism, that stupid increase in expenditures,
right,
when the fiscal analysis was this, and then it's quadrupled in just 12 months or whatever. You can't even question that if you want to keep your seat.
Yep.
So what you end up saying, behind the scenes is, well, yeah, that's just one issue. I've got to look out for my constituents in all these other areas as well. And so they justify looking the other way to this fraud.
Which, again, we got to move on from this one because we got other stuff to talk about here.
I like this one, though.
But I know it's a fun one,
nice one
to talk about. But this is also, though, as an aside, where voter registration and voter ID laws matter a lot. And when people come over, when are they allowed to vote, and how do you prove your identity of who you say you are? Those things matter. And when you look at the left and say, why do you guys oppose so much people simply showing an ID to vote? I think you have to see these types of programs and understand why. All right, moving to the other side of the globe, Venezuela. Right, we had
a new country over the weekend.
Got a new country over the weekend. We might be adding another territory in Greenland here soon. It's a pretty big day for the country in so many ways. My favorite thing online right now are every time something happens, the different Marco Rubio memes of him dressed as the leader of Venezuela and the leader of Greenland and the coach of the Browns and the coach of the Ravens. And the Raiders, like it's pretty great, but I think one, it's jarring, again, especially in our lifetime, David. It's not. As far as I know, I can only know of one other time in our lifetime this happened, which was in Panama in the 90s, where the U.S. went in and removed somebody who was a leader of a country, right, legitimate or not. Just did this, and both times we would say the leader was not legitimate, but the immense military operation that went into effect on this. I think there's something just so glorious about the fact that this happened days after Zoran Mamdani got sworn in, and so we got to bring a socialist leader who destroyed his country to a city where a socialist leader is who's planning on destroying his city. That was just so perfect. But what was your reaction when you saw all of this?
First of all, the military flex was substantial.
Was amazing,
right?
Oh my gosh,
the memes on that are.
I took my American flag and just stood outside for 3 hours in the cold,
which is dangerous in your neighborhood.
Exactly, you're telling me.
But the thing is, I was a little concerned about the legalities, right? And again, we're never going to know what they know.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just did a little bit of research. And so what the left is saying is that there's no legitimate reason to justify why they could go in and just take a leader and then say, we're going to run this now.
Yep.
They're going on UN international law, and they're saying that it's a violation of
what the left is saying,
the UN Charter. That's what they're saying. But even in the UN Charter, it says that there's, you can do it, right? You can attack another sovereign country, whatever, if there's a threat to the international peace. And when you have anywhere, depending on what years you're looking at, 200 to 500 million metric tons of dope coming in from one, and sometimes it comes across the water like all those boats that got blown up. Sometimes it comes up through Colombia and Mexico. But they are serving our country all this dope. And
8 to 9 million refugees that are fleeing their country as
that's
well.
right. And so the right. So the Trump side of it is that Venezuela is a narco-state.
Yep.
And because it is a narco-state, producing billions, some people say upwards of 20% of their gross domestic product is dope and illegal narcotics, whether it's gold mining or whatever it is. So when you're dealing with a narco-state and you're dealing with a terrorist and leader of, cartels, then these kind of actions,
I think,
are warranted.
David, to that end, I think that's what's important is that when you listen to the Trump administration, they describe this as a police action, not a military action, right? Because Maduro and his wife were convicted of U.S. federal crimes, of crimes in the United States for their trafficking of drugs here.
They ain't have to snatch up the wifey though.
She was a part of it. She was a part
that's
of
the
it.
wife.
Right?
Wifeys are off. You know
when
what I
you
mean?
when you want to have it,
saying, Vince?
when you get locked up, don't you? You'll be saying, right? One day when they
They
come
ain't
for
gonna
you,
mess with the
David.
wifey. I love you, babe.
No,
They ain't gonna lay a hand on you.
But the part about this, and again, this is one of these things that what I love about this president is that really going back to the Obama era, we would talk tough, and then in the moment do nothing. Biden himself said Maduro was not a legitimate president, right? Like Europe said he's not a legitimate. He's not the president. He's just a guy.
That's right.
There that just happened to take control of the government and the military, but wasn't legitimately elected and was convicted of crimes in America, right? And so there's a few different things here. One, that the extraordinary circumstances here of here's an individual who committed crimes in our country, who then through unbelievable political pressure and military action and violence, named himself the president of this country. We went in and got him. People always say, oh, well, would it be all right if somebody did that to President Trump? Well, one, Trump has not committed crimes in other countries, so no. But two, we're America, y'all.
I dare you.
I don't know what to say. That's the
Right. Mess around, find out. Like your boy
exactly.
said.
No one's going to be doing that. But it's such an apples to oranges comparison.
Yeah.
And it is it matters right now that these things, and again, hopefully, the world and what we really need is the next generation to see every place socialism is tried, people die and it fails, and evil men like Maduro, they prosper from it, right? I mean, again, this is what ticks me off about so many. You can go on X or any of the websites and the sort of conservative websites, and you'll see things like this. But the left, few years ago, criticizing Maduro, saying he shouldn't be there and all that, and because Trump's the one to do it, now it's evil. Yeah. And that's just normal
and the whole
hypocrisy.
media narrative between the liberals, up in New York, who are protesting this is terrible. You're painting him in this evil light. But then they switch, the day after, right, when all the Venezuelans from Florida.
Right, exactly.
I mean, they shut down cities.
Right, just celebrate.
They out there dancing, crying with folks on the phone. Now, granted, the people of Venezuela couldn't, right, because that regime is still
there
in power.
Right.
Right, with Delcy or whatever her name is. She's president now. But they on the phone with the Venezuelans from Florida. I just thought it was a beautiful picture that even the mainstream media had to cover.
Right. No, that's right. Well, last but not least, David, and I know we got to get to this interview that with Jared Horvath, because it's one of my favorite ones we've done in a while. However, we got to talk just real short. We've had 2 lieutenant governors picked in Ohio. Rob McCauley for our good Senate president is Vivek Ramaswamy's LG, and David Pepper is Amy Acton's LG. Just a few quick hot takes on it.
I thought that was a good idea.
I know.
Amy Acton,
Amy Acton alone, and then Amy Acton selecting David Pepper is even more hilarious. I'll just say real briefly on Rob McCauley. I've known Rob basically 10 years I've been with CCV. and has been a good friend on a number of issues, most recently on the fatherhood stuff, championing that for us. Always a 100% pro-life voting record, was a champion for us on SAFE Act and Save Women's Sports, consistent on backpack bill. I mean, just a superb voting record, and has been a good leader for us. I especially want to shout out as well as Senate President, getting Senate Bill 1 done, which was the ban on DEI at colleges and universities. So, Senator Serino, who's the one who carried that bill, the sponsor, deserves a ton of credit for that. But on controversial bills like that's why our statements often we're so quick to thank leadership, the Speaker and the Senate President, because the pressure, especially from the universities on the members, and it's so easy to lose a member along the way, is massive. And so having a strong Senate President that supports his members and pushes back against, willing to look at somebody like Ohio State and says, hey, you guys need to knock this off. Like, that matters a lot. And you saw him really produce results. And I think Rob's a great compliment to Vivek in that Rob understands. Vivek, one of the things we love about the guy is he's an outsider. He's never been a politician before, things like
Reformer.
that. Right, reformer. But knowing the State House matters, right? And having somebody like Rob who knows those people there. And so we're really excited about that. I don't know if you had anything on Rob, but I just thought it was great.
I don't get too excited about, which way these things go. I am happy that, he is a friend to CCV and issues that we stand for. Yeah, definitely, great Christian. My heart was for Christina Roeder, Senator Roeder. That was my heart. But I think this is a good move for sure.
Yeah. And then just real quickly on David Pepper, for those of you who don't remember who David Pepper is, David Mahan didn't remember who David Pepper was.
Great first name, though.
Right, exactly.
One check for him.
He failed. He ran for auditor once and lost. He ran for state attorney general against Mike DeWine and lost. But I think really where David Pepper made his mark is he was the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party from about 2016 to 2020. And what's important about that in that stretch, that was really the rise of Trump. That's when Republicans really took over everything in the state. So here's a guy who couldn't even run the party well, took over the state Supreme Court, took over the legislature. That's the guy she picked. But I think it's important to understand the state went pretty far right over these last few years, not only because David Pepper ran a terrible party, but he led the party so far left, right? That's 2016 to 2020 was when the party said our official position our position, whether in writing or just in practice, is that men can become women.
Right, they're doubling down on insanity again.
Exactly, and that we have to allow boys and girls sports, and that we should have taxpayer funding of abortion. And that it's racist to question whether we are
billions of dollars
sending billions of fraud to Somali daycares. Like, that's
and terrorists.
Yeah, and like the sort of CRT, the all of that kind of worldview that just took over the Democratic Party, a very different party than you and I remember growing up. That all happened under David Pepper. He was the one that drove this party so far to the left, and that's who Amy Acton, the COVID queen, picked as her LG.
I can't get the song out of my head. COVID queen.
But plenty more to come on all of that. Without Mike here, we just kind of went all over the place. But I think we were pretty good discussions. But I'm super excited for you to hear this interview. Honestly, I think it's one of the most important discussions that we've had on the podcast in a while with this Dr. Jared Horvath.
For sure.
He had a piece in the Free Press recently about technology in the classroom and the harm that it's having. not just cell phones. I mean, that's the thing that's important about this. We've talked a lot about cell phones in the classroom. Thankfully, we banned them in Ohio, but there's still more work to be done. And
testing.
I got to tell you, you got to hear this episode and share it with your kid's school, with your local school. There's so much that's going on about. It's not just the distraction. It actually makes learning harder.
Yeah, the ability to think.
Yeah. And there's so much stuff that's going to come out of this that's going to be eye-opening for you. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Pastors today are constantly pressured to stay out of politics, even as their congregations face confusing cultural issues that can only be navigated with solid biblical wisdom. Hi friends, Nick Spencer here, director of CCV's Tom Minery Fellowship for Cultural Engagement. The Tom Minery Fellowship helps pastors understand the times and shepherd their churches with foundational truths from Scripture. This program brings pastors together in regional cohorts where they gain biblical insight, practical guidance, and the confidence to speak wisely into today's unique challenges. Ohio pastors can join a community of leaders committed to courage, clarity, and connection. Learn more and apply today at mineryfellowship.org or click the link in the show notes for more information.
And we're back on The Narrative. We are joined now by Jared Cooney Horvath, who's a neuroscientist, educator, and best-selling author who specializes in human learning and brain development. He's the creator of the Learning Blueprint, an international award-winning program helping educators and students understand how learning actually works. He's authored 6 books, and we're going to talk to him today about the digital delusion, how classroom technology harms our kids' learning, and how to help them thrive again. Jared, thanks so much for joining us here on The Narrative.
Thank you guys for having me on. I love the work you're doing and happy to pitch in.
Well, I think we could probably just stick with that subtitle that classroom technology is harming our kids' learning, say amen, thanks so much, and call this the shortest podcast ever. But would like to know, what are you finding in your research that's really pointing to the severity of the problem of classroom technology harming our kids' ability to learn?
Yeah, I think if you just step out into the public, I think most parents know something wrong is happening. That kids today, and I hate to say this, it's one of the hardest things I have to say, but Gen Z, our children, are the first generation in recorded history to underperform us as parents. Every generation of kids have been happier, healthier, smarter than their folks. And that's exactly what we want. Gen Z is the first to come out less happy, less healthy, and unfortunately cognitively duller, for lack of a better term, than we are. And Gen Alpha is a little bit worse. And for the longest time, we didn't know what to pin that on. And by all means, you've got things like smartphones, make perfect sense. We're doing too much of that stuff. Over-medicalization of childhood, that's going to harm. But that never explained the cognitive stuff. Why are they not thinking as well? And the only thing we can draw that back to is the introduction of what we call ed tech, which is educational technology. Once we started bringing schools, one-to-one laptops, or computers and one-to-one laptops, all that stuff into the classroom, that's when learning really started to drop. And so it doesn't matter. You look at international tests, you look at laboratory research, you look at classroom research, every trend looks the same. The more kids use tech at school for learning, the lower their learning becomes. So we started to realize it's just not really a learning tool, unfortunately.
So, Jared, how did we get into this place where we have so much tech in the classroom right now? It feels like, I remember as a kid, we had computers, obviously, all over our school. I'm like right in the middle of card carrying millennial. We had computers around, but they weren't a part of the day-to-day experience. When did this all come where there was that, you use the phrase one-to-one, computer to kid technology. When did that happen? And I also think the question is, why did it happen? Because I think a lot of the presumption is, hey, this will be great. We'll have more computers. But was there actually data that they used to say this will be better for kids?
Never. At no point did tech companies or schools demand data showing efficacy. It was just one of those things. It was here, it exists, let's use it. And it was our job to show non-efficacy, which is insane if you think about it. I work medically a lot. So if I develop a new treatment for depression, I can't just give it to everyone and say, you tell me if it works. I have to prove to you that it's going to be effective and safe. But it's been the complete opposite here. So if you really want to track it back, I would say the big kind of move was 2002 was when Maine That was the first state to say we're giving all kids computers in middle school. And so that was kind of the start of this tech move. And as an interesting aside, I've never published this data, but I'd love to one of these days. When Maine decided to go tech heavy in 2002, they were, I think, number 8, the 8th state in the union in terms of all academic scores. They are now 46th. And you can actually watch as they started implementing more tech, you could just see scores dropping. And that's the same anytime you look at tech, that's what happens. But I think if you want to go into the why, that it started happening in 2002, cute. But why it started to really take off, and we go back to the narrative, was who was controlling the narrative. In the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, tech companies started a little thing called TED Talks. TED Talks were the most widely discussed, watched, talked about like cultural phenomenon that we had. It was bigger than newspapers at the time, it was bigger than everything. The T in TED Talks was tech. So it's no wonder that if you go back and you look at anyone who talks about education on TED Talks, will say the same things. Education is broken. Education is killing our kids' creativity. Education is killing our kids' ability to think. We need a solution. What is that solution? It's technology. Now, the joke is, if you go back and look at the data, school was never broken. By what metric could you say school was broken? In the late 90s, school was having better outcomes than it ever had in history. If you went to school in the 90s, you were in the golden age of education. But it's hard to sell a product.
93.
That's us. Hey, it was hard to sell a product without having a problem. You can't sell a solution without a problem. So they invented a problem by saying school was broken. And the solution is going to be use our technology. And basically, they just ran a much better narrative than anyone else. And so we bought it, and the US bought it, the West bought it, and all around the world, people said, I guess education sucks. Let's use computers. And with zero evidence, that was one of the weirdest decisions we made.
My wife last year wrote a chapter for Katie Faust's book, Child-Centered Politics, Child-Centered Politics, I think was the title of the book. And it was about how through the mid 2000s, Google just started giving Chromebooks for free to school districts.
Yeah.
Every kid gets a Chromebook, and therefore, if you're going to use the Chromebook, every kid needs a Google login. And now Google's got this huge base of data and everything else, and nobody ever stopped to ask the question: one, is this actually good for the kids? Or two, why is Google giving us all this stuff for free? Is it just out of Google's the goodness of their own hearts?
And isn't that funny? If you just think about any other context where a business, a company gives away free stuff, you would never believe they're altruistic. You would say, why? What's the catch here? You're giving me this for something. And let's say I ran a business, I would never give away anything for free unless I thought it would lead to down the track profits. We're doing this for a reason. We start giving kids free computers. They did it for two reasons. One, the Chromebook wasn't selling. It was a horrible device. So they're like, all right, what else can we do with these? But two, they realized that there's something very interesting about learning in that it's a problem called transfer. Human beings are really bad with transfer. If I learn a skill in a certain context, it's very difficult for me to use that skill in a different context. So this is why you'll have some kids who can do math with numbers, but if you give them a word problem, they're like, I don't know what to do. You'll see some athletes can do just fine if they're on their home court, put them on another court, and they all of a sudden can't shoot the ball anymore. So transfer, through K through 12 education, one of the things we've always worked on was how do we help kids develop transfer? That's through generalization. That's through you learn in as varied environments as possible. You do it in as many different ways as you can. Unfortunately, computers are wickedly narrow, which means when you learn to do a skill or an ability or concept on a computer, you are basically tied to that computer. It is so hard to move it off of that computer. We can, it's just really difficult. So I think they realize as well, if we can get kids to start learning on a PC, we will have customers for life. For the rest of their life, they will need this PC to do their job. And you started to see it because as Mac jumped in now, you got this huge battle between Mac people and PC people. And the idea was it's because it's so hard to transfer between the two. If you learned on a PC, you will always be PC. If you learned on a Mac, you will always be Mac. By all means, some people will jump, but for the most part, they realized early on the way learning works, if we get them early, we will have them forever. And that's where they were going to make their profit, was when the kids became adults, they would buy our computers. So it was no altruism whatsoever there.
Yeah, Jed, I don't know how old you are, sir, but one of the benefits of getting old like myself is that you get to see both sides of the
So
pendulum swing.
old.
He said it, not me.
So old.
You get to see both sides of the pendulum switch. I was in the classrooms in 2002, and every inner city school was a social justice concern that we don't have as many computers as the school up the street. I'm like, guys, we don't want this. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
going to make our kids sick. I mean, I was saying that back then, begging parents about these phones and things. But now we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way, right? Which I think is fascinating. We're seeing governors like ours saying, wait a minute, we need to first, consider, study what's going on with these cell phones, being allowed in schools and things like that. Now, we've got a lot of states banning cell phones in schools. It was
Like ours,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, like ours. I was in a school here downtown just a couple weeks ago, and they had an entire wall of lockers there were like an entire wall lit up like red and orange, and it was because of the charging that was going on in these lockers all up and down the hallway. And I asked the teacher, I said, what is the response from the students? Because that's what we heard when we were trying to get this legislation passed was, the kids are going to riot, the parents are going to riot. But here's what they told me. This is what the research said from states that did it before us. The kids take about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they're good.
Yep.
The parents take about 2 months and they're good. And after a few months, everybody, parents and students, appreciate that these phones are locked up during the day. Is that what you're seeing across the country?
100%. It's one of the weirdest things is I think kids who are the most affected by tech are well aware that something is not right. They know that they're unhappy. They know that they're addicted. You feel it. That pull you feel to pick up your phone every second of the day. It's a visceral sensation that is uncomfortable. I mean, we pick up the phone to ease that tension. And even a young kid recognizes, I am in tension. I am tense. This is not comfortable. And so I think it's exactly as you said, it's kind of like quitting smoking. Once you get over that initial hurdle of craving, you settle in and you start to recognize life can be a little bit better. Life can be a little bit different. And I think the kids, exactly to your point, recognize it first. When they start playing with each other, they're young enough to reset really quickly. Go out to the playground, kick the ball around, make fun of each other. People are like, oh, bullying is on the rise.
The best part
I
of
hate
life.
to say,
Right.
I would rather bullying be on the rise live and in person than bullying be on the rise on a cell phone.
Absolutely.
Because when we do it live and in person, believe it or not, that's how we develop resilience. That is, you can't make a strong human being unless they're forged through some sort of fire. And that's where when kids are being kids. Now, as teachers, we don't let it happen. I don't watch kids making fun of each other and go, nice one. Yeah, I'll go in and intervene. I'm not encouraging it, but I know it's going on and that is beneficial for them. They know it, we know it, and everyone feels it after a while. I'll tell you, here's my favorite stat, David, was, so I worked in Australia for a long time where they were banning phones before it was a concept in the US. And I said, I've worked with a lot of schools that had phone policies that said basically you can use them between classes, but no use during class, or you can keep it in your locker. Those schools, most of them went back to just allowing cell phones. Policies never really worked. But I have yet to find a single school in the world that has banned cell phones and then gone back to using them. I'm willing to be proven wrong. Somebody give me one name of one school. But any time a school says no to smartphones, they're gone for good because everyone realizes, oh, this is better.
Yeah. So, Jared, that was the question I was going to ask you. I think sometimes we make assumptions that our listeners kind of know what we know about this because of this legislation in Ohio. We've been doing some research, but give us some more data like that, right? Like I found that 72% of teachers agree with smartphone bans and things. But in the media, sometimes you hear that, well, the teachers weren't in agreement or the parents weren't in agreement. But at large, for the most part, folks are. And give us some numbers on the impact, the positive behavioral impacts, academic impacts that such a policy would have.
If we're just talking straight smartphones, so we're not going to talk like laptops, we won't talk computers, just get smartphones out of the class. One of the biggest things, and I'm a learning guy, if your school bans cell phones, you will see gains of anywhere between 2 to 11 extra hours of learning per week. Per week. That means there are some schools that are almost doubling their learning time simply by getting rid of a tool. That's how disruptive these things were. You start to see, I think there was a school in Kansas I was just talking with. When they banned cell phones, their behavioral problems dropped 80%. Number of kids getting suspensions or detentions dropped 80%. Number of times they had to intervene with parents dropped 80%. Kids became normal again. And it's just like when you take a phone away from your baby, you know they have a tantrum. Kids were doing the same thing in schools. When there was no phone, there were no more tantrums. People started to live normally again. Happiness goes up, relationships goes up, time kids spend together goes up, time kids spend doing physical exercise goes up, so physical health goes up as well. I cannot see, like somebody the other day said, when you ban cell phones, the data is mixed. And that's a perfect statistical way that is such a, if you're a statistician, you know what they're saying, but if you're not a statistician, you're like, oh, it must mean. In this case, here's what it means. Usually when someone says data is mixed, what they're just saying is there's a spread of impact. But there usually is one direction of impact. So when they're arguing that, oh, the data is mixed, what they're saying is it's mixed between 2 hours or 11 hours more learning, between 10% and 80% better learning. At no point is their data showing that banning phones harms anything at all. But they're using that to get you thinking. So there will always be benefit. It's just how much benefit is mixed. Oh, well, and if you told me take this pill and it will cure your headache, at least 10%, maybe 20 to 30%, but it won't give you a harder, give me the dang pill. Sure, I'm fine with that. There's no downside to doing these kind of measures that we've seen so far.
I want to ask you about laptops and computers in the classroom in general. And this is a selfish question from a parent standpoint, because my wife and I have had an endless frustration with Chromebooks and that type of stuff that our kids have been learning on. There is the distraction piece. Yes. Like stop looking at YouTube, stop playing online games. But what we found is some of our kids just do better with pen and paper. And we go to the school and we say, hey, he's not doing well. And it's not because he doesn't know this stuff. It's because he has to take a test on a laptop. Is there a way around that? No, we can't do anything. He's got to take it on the laptop, which is ridiculous to me. Can you tell us a little bit about just the process of learning and why being on a laptop versus pen and paper would have an adverse effect?
Yeah. So now we get to go into mechanisms. I always tell people data is good, but data doesn't change anyone's mind. Mechanism. If you can tell me why the data looks the way it does, now we start having a conversation. So there's a concept called the mode effect, which basically says human beings perform differently on analog versus digital mediums. And almost to an example, 99% of the time, computers underperform analog. Now we can say, why does the mode effect exist? Two kind of minor concepts that I think are important. One, reading. So most of us use screens to read. Kids get their homework online, kids get textbooks online. It becomes a reading tool. Reading. Human memory works in a very specific way in that every time we make a memory for something new, that memory will become stamped with a three-dimensional location. Where in space did that idea, that event occur? And later we can use that spatial orientation to recall that event. So space is a massive aspect of human memory. When we read hard copy books, there is a clear, unchanging three-dimensional location all the time. Until this book burns into dust, the word 8 will be 10% of the way through the book, left page, top left-hand side, man, it ain't going nowhere. That's a massive memory boost for me. So that's why, like, if you're an avid reader of books, you might not be able to remember verbatim what you read, but you'll know where in the book that thing that you want to look up occurred, because space is huge for us. You read on a screen, those words start at the bottom of the screen, go through the middle, pass out the top. There is no three-dimensional location. An entire aspect of human memory that we've developed for hundreds of thousands of years is basically ignored and gone. So this is why when we read on a screen, most people will make it about 4 minutes and then they start skimming, because they know their brain is basically telling them, you're not actually getting this. I have no place to put any of this. So don't worry about it. Just find what you need and get out of there. So this is why something as simple as reading, I tell parents, number one thing you can do for your kids, buy a printer. print it out. Homework assignments, reading assignments, anything. You got paper, because of the spatial aspect, it will boost performance. But go to like writing now. Writing is the same thing. Typing is wickedly fast and highly uniform. Doesn't matter how hard I press the L key or how soft, it's coming out with the exact same thing. Writing is highly personal and unique. Every angle, every letter, every writing utensil is going to require something subtly different from me. So already when we compare handwriting to typing, you're going to get a little bit more depth of understanding and comprehension just due to the amount of effort that goes into me making sure my writing is working. But now when we tack that back to school, learning, most kids let's just talk about like note taking. When you type up notes during a class, most people do what's called verbatim note taking. I hear the word, I write the word. I hear the word, I write the word, like a stenographer. Those kids get copious amounts of notes, but they learn almost nothing. You can ask them, hey, what did you learn today? They'll say, I don't know, I got to go read my notes. Meanwhile, kids who write by hand, there ain't a human being in the world who can handwrite as fast as I'm teaching. So by definition, if you're writing by hand, you already have to be thinking about meaning. You have to be parsing ideas. Does that fit with that? What's important? What's not? What are the themes? That's why handwritten notes are so gross. You have lines and arrows and crosses because you're processing the deeper meaning. That deeper thinking while you're writing leads to deeper comprehension, leads to deeper learning. That's one of the biggest changes we've had. If you can handwrite notes versus type, give kids a notebook versus a keyboard in front of them, they will learn significantly better just by the medium we're using. So that's where you see these tools. It's some people say we're just using them wrong, but you could say, no, there are aspects of it that are just antithesis to how human beings think and learn. It's not how we use it. The tool will never be good for these kind of reasons.
Jared, I got to say, we've been diving deeper and deeper into the tech in the classroom issue. And I've not heard that level of explanation before on why the tech is so harmful, right? I think for a lot of us who have been digging in on this, especially, there's the cell phone piece that we're seeing more and more agreement on. I think even here our bill had pretty bipartisan support. But then what you just described with just general tech, I think is a piece that, a conversation that feels very much in its infancy, but also the explanation for it too, I think is so fascinating and so important. So, when we're talking about public policy, we've had Claire Morell on with her book, The Tech Exit from Ethics and Public Policy Center, and working with Claire on some legislation. We've been even talking to Vivek here, who Lord willing will be the next governor of Ohio, about, hey, we need to say kids can take tests on paper. But as we're looking at public policy, looking at the data you have about tech in the classroom, what should lawmakers and voters, as we're talking to our elected officials, be pushing for? Right, we spend more money on education than ever before in American history. We're getting worse and worse results. What should we be doing to make sure the money we're spending in the public education system is being utilized best in relation to tech? What are good policies in this place?
Isn't it funny that we could spend probably half of what we spend right now and get better results because most of that money is going to tech infrastructure? And it's like, man, you're spending it on the wrong thing. It's like, if we want a good football team, don't worry about the seats in the stands, buy a better player. But they're worried about making sure we got the right wires in the right places. What I'd say is, I think there are some lawsuits coming down the pipe here, which are basically going to force tech, if they win, to change the way they organize things for learning and students. But I think some of the easiest steps are, one, any tool that's going to be inserted into school has to come with an evidence base. And that evidence base has to demonstrate that it performs better than tools we already have present in the school. And that to me is like the most basic. The ed tech does not have to prove a thing. It just has to exist and we will buy it. Where's the evidence that LMS systems boost learning? There is none because no one's ever done that research, but we're going to use it all the same. So I'd say step one has to be, you need a robust evidence base before we even consider any tools, which would lead to a step two, which is a tech audit, where now basically over the last 10 years, Every district, every state, whatever it's going to be, has to go back through the tech that they've already invested in. Put a moratorium, no more tech until we finish this audit. Figure out what is being used and what's not. Because I promise you, millions of dollars just go into tech that sits there and gathers dust. No one touches half of this stuff. Get rid of what's not working, figure out what people are using, and determine what impact it is having. Is it helping or is it not? And if it's not, time to get rid of it. Mate, we're not asking for miracles. We're asking for basic baseline evidence. That is the minimum requirement for any other field. We just need that here as well. To wit, I would then say any schools who are kind of playing with this as well is you now have to become wildly tech intentional. Right now, tech is so available that it just becomes the default. Everyone get out your laptop, let's go. Everyone get out your cell phone, let's go. If a school returns to, we have a computer lab, and anyone who wants to use tech for learning has to get their kids up, sign that room out, walk them across campus, and now use tech. Once you put a bit of friction between the tool and the decision to use the tool, that's when people will start to become very specific with it. Teachers won't use it out of default. They'll now have to really decide, is it worth my time and effort to make this happen when I could just use this pencil and paper sitting here? No, it ain't. So we've got to somehow reintroduce friction between the teacher and the decision to then use tech for learning. And it'd be the same thing with students as well. But I think it just boils down to that. Give me my evidence, stop the buying until we know what's going on now, and then lock these tools down.
Well, hold on, though, Jared. As we're doing this call right now on Zoom, right?
Yep.
Mike has his laptop in front of him with his notes, and Mike is a professional's professional, right? Like you can't be
absolutely
successful in life like Mike Andrews.
I'm playing Angry Birds.
Oh, that's well. Every job in this day and age, especially with the advent of AI, is going to require tech. So how are we going to be preparing kids for the next generation if they're not using the tool, if they're not learning on the tools that they're going to have to use when they get to the workplace?
That is my favorite argument everyone makes. So here's a good rule of thumb going forward. If you teach a kid how to use a tool, they will be able to use that tool. If you teach a kid how to think and learn, they will be able to use every tool. That has always been the role of a K through 12 education. K through 12 general education, the operative word is general. We are not a tools-based system. If you want that, go to a TAFE or an IT institute. There you will learn a tool. I will teach you like how to be a welder. But the trick is, when you're a good welder, I now won't imagine you're going to be the best plumber in the world or the best carpenter, because we know when I teach you on a tool, it's a very narrow context I'm teaching you in. And to make matters worse, if the field of welding evolves and they no longer use the tools I taught you on, you're toast. Your learning is now obsolete because I taught you on the wrong tools. When we try and say we need to prep kids for a tech future, people think that means we need to teach them on tech, which is a tools-based learning system, which is the best way to guarantee they will learn the tech you teach them, but not be able to transfer that to any other tool. They will not adapt. This is why, believe it or not, Gen Z has about the same digital literacy as Gen X. Our parents and our kids can do the exact same thing on tech, even though our parents didn't touch this stuff until their 40s, and my kids have had it since the day they were born. Why? Because working on a tool is not how you develop literacy. General education. We don't teach kids English because we want you to be writers. We don't teach history because we think every kid's going to be a historian. What we're doing is teaching kids how to think through knowledge, how to think through systems and recognize patterns. That is where you develop the concept of literacy. That is where you develop the ability to now think through digital systems. Get life literacy, you will get digital literacy for free. It's an add-on. Focus on digital literacy. There is no guarantee you will get that or life literacy in the process. So believe it or not, and one of the most ironic twists we have, and the data backs us up, I'll show you guys the data as well. The more kids are taught on tech, the worse their tech abilities come. It's crazy. But it's purely because that's not where literacy comes from. It comes from a broader understanding, and that's what we always focus on in school. And I'll say that as well too, is what about AI? Everyone's like, we got to teach kids AI. Think about how stupidly simple AI is. It is a box that you type words into. You don't need explicit training on that. What you need is deep enough knowledge to put meaningful words in that box. So
And
I
know when
would
it's
take-
wrong. Know when it's lying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And be able to vet it when it spits out nonsense. So this is why the best people, the highest echelon in any field that you want to look at, those people will have made it through a general education first. And what we're doing is we're teaching you how to think. That ability is going to transfer into the real world and go with you. Anything else is going to be stick you into a very narrow context. So ironically, best way to train your kids is to not train them on tech.
Fascinating.
I
So
know,
is there still
it's-
hope for
it's
David?
trippy.
That's the real question.
Yeah.
Can he still be taught?
Yeah.
David, how old are you? You said you're
Give it to
old.
me
How
straight,
old are you?
I'm 50.
Oh, you're fine.
50
My
and
dad
fine.
My dad is 74 now, and he uses emoticons with the best of them. You're fine. If you want to, it's all there for you. That's the joke. Is as we get older, we just don't want to do this stuff. We have our patterns. We know what's going on in the world. Like my mom. This is gonna sound crazy, but I sent my mom the first book I wrote years ago, and she sent it back with a note that said, "I already know everything I need to know. Thanks." And that's as we get older, that's how we were like, I wouldn't have made it this far if I needed more information. I'm fine. But if you ever wanted to, you would find computers are built so simply. They're there to make the lives of experts easier. I know how to do stats. I don't feel like spending 2 hours doing stats. I'll just let this machine do it in 2 seconds. Sweet. But exactly as you were saying, Aaron, that only works because I'm an expert, because I can vet the output, because I can tell when it's lying. I can tell when it's right. I can tell when I screwed up, when it screwed up. Kids are not experts. They are novices learning how to become experts. When we use the same tools we use for experts to stop thinking, when we use those tools for kids to try and teach them how to think, the tool and the outcome are completely mismatched. So that's why I always say that you have to earn the right to use a computer well, but that usually comes through not touching it as a kid.
This gets into a really interesting worldview conversation, though, that I think is at the root of what we're talking about, which is the value of knowing things. What's the purpose of knowing and understanding things? If it's just to get to the outcome,
Yeah.
then why do we have education, right? Like you said, AI, in many cases, it already is. It will be better than us at a lot of things, right?
Mhm.
And we're gonna have to ask ourselves, why is it worth understanding, geometry or calculus or things like that, right? Why is it worth knowing history? And I mean, Jared, when you're interacting with folks in academia or even in big tech, are they wrestling with these questions? It feels like it's a headlong race into, because we can do it, we should do it.
Yeah.
What is the worldview of the people that are pushing these things right now?
You'd be shocked how little they've thought about this stuff. There's no depth on most of their parts. And I've talked with all the big head tech guys. You got to remember, they're not educators. Most of them aren't parents. They're engineers with one idea. Can I make this thing work? And to your point, they never asked, should I? They never asked for what purpose. When they released ChatGPT, go back 3 years, they flat out said, we do not know what this is for. We created it to see if we could. It seems to work. You tell us what it's for. And they pumped it out to the public with the express understanding that the public would tell them it's good for this, this, and that. They had no reason to build it. But to your point about then the knowledge is, so these people think, well, access to knowledge is everything. Access to knowledge is nothing. If access to knowledge was going to change anything, the internet would have broken us long before AI did. And the school library would have broken us before that. And then the state library would have broken us before that. The invention of the printing press would have changed everything. And it didn't. Why? Because human cognition didn't change. So there's two things to remember. One is exactly what you said. Only the people with knowledge embedded within them can vet the output of tech. Therefore, only the people who are already know more than the tech can use the tech in a meaningful way to create anything new. Everyone else is just at the whim of the tech, which is kind of what they want, because at that stage, when no one can vet the output, then whoever creates the program controls the narrative completely. So it's expertise. Basically, with tech, you can only work down. If you work above your level with tech, you're flying blind. If you work below your level with tech, you can vet it, you can make it work for you. But the other thing is, and this is my favorite, is let's say, like, what is the one thing everyone wants from their kids and the job people say they want from it's not tech abilities, it's creativity. It's critical thinking. We want kids who can adapt and think on the fly. Now we can dive in and say, where do these things come from? Is creativity something that somebody has, and like some people have more creativity than others? It turns out the answer to that is no. Creativity is not a skill that you have that's just isolated over here. Creativity, critical thinking, all these higher order thinking skills emerge from lower order knowledge. The more you know, the more creative you become. The more facts you have embedded within you, the more critical you become. So here's an example. So let's just think about creativity. How does creativity work? Anytime you enter into creative mode, let's say I want to solve a problem, you start with what's called focused thinking mode. Basically, what you do is you rip specific memories out of your brain, move them around to try and solve a problem. You're doing your work. Now, here's the trick. 2, 3, 4 hours later, you're done. Man, you've had enough. I got to go take a walk. I'm fried. I'm going to go cook some dinner. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to bed, whatever it's going to be. Believe it or not, when you leave, when you step away from a problem, that is when creativity kicks in. That is when biology gets to work. Now biology enters into a mode called diffuse thinking mode. Basically, subconsciously, without any input from you, your brain is now going to take all those things you were thinking about, and it's going to reorganize them with memories you didn't even know you had in your brain. It's going to say, well, you forgot in 3rd grade you did something similar to this. Oh, in 8th grade, that kind of matches what you were going for. And then at some point, when the brain does its thing, you're going to get what's called a moment of insight. You're just washing the dishes, and all of a sudden you're going to go, oh, shoot, I got an idea. Oh, I know how to answer that problem. Give me a pen and paper. Let's go. You're going to get to work again. And that's why the people argue, some people in the creativity research field argue 80% of creativity, of critical thinking, of all these things we want, 80% of that happens when you're not paying attention, when you leave the room and let your body get to work. That's why go to bed with a problem, wake up with a solution. You'll come up with your best ideas in the shower when you're not trying to do anything. So now we can bring this back to education. Why is learning and facts so important? When I'm in that focused creativity mode or whatever it is, I can access the internet. I can access AI. I can look up things. When I go into that diffuse thinking mode, which is more important, my brain cannot access the internet. My brain can't look things up. It is stuck only with what I have ever given it, which means the limit of my creativity will be the amount of information I have embedded within me, not have access to online, but have stored within my personal brain. That will be the end, the beginning, and all I can do creatively, critical thinking wise. So this is why all those people who say we don't need facts anymore, we can use AI for facts and go right into the deep stuff. Best way to kill the deep stuff is to use AI to stop learning things. The best way to make sure your kid has no creativity is to stop teaching them stuff, because stuff is the ground from which creativity springs. No stuff, nothing else. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, I mean, anybody who's ever written anything will tell you, you reach that point where you just, my wife's a journalist, a writer, and she just reaches that point with everything she writes where I just got to get up and walk and walk away from it. But then, comes back the next day and, it just flows, right? And
there's your clarity.
This is that whole area too, man. We could spend a whole other podcast on that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I gotta say, I didn't imagine I could enjoy talking neuroscience so much.
Look at
that. When you get them, awesome. But another example of a mechanism is you could show the data that kids have less creativity today than before. But once you know why, you start to see, hey, maybe the tool itself, the fact that this tool does nothing but store memories and information and get it out of your brain, maybe that's why it's not good for us. Maybe it's good for production, but it never should have been in a classroom for learning.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could keep going here, but want to be respectful of your time, Jared. Before we let you go, tell our listeners, where can they find your book? Where can they follow what you're doing?
Oh, thank you. So the book is The Digital Delusion. You can get it on Amazon. I think by the end of this week, it'll be available everywhere like Barnes and Nobles and stuff. So it should be there.
But they should order a physical copy, right?
Yes, you can. I know the publishers made a Kindle copy, and I'm like, that's funny. There will be some chapters as you're reading it on your Kindle. I will be talking directly to what you're doing, and now you'll get meta. You'll go, uh-oh. But so if you can get a physical copy, do it. But I also, if you go onto YouTube, Jared Cooney Horvath is my YouTube channel. I just put out little videos about learning every couple weeks. So if you want to just kind of keep up on what's a good learning strategy, what's research saying about learning for my kids, or if you're a teacher, just know that's another good resource that I kind of try and put out there a lot.
Jared Cooney Horvath, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. We're grateful for your time and glad to have you as a guest today on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.